welcome to Digital Shift, also known as Corporate Evolution Tales. Join us as we dive into the dynamic world of digital transformation. From illuminating case studies to captivating narratives, we uncover the stories behind companies' journeys toward digital excellence. Whether you are a seasoned corporate leader or an aspiring innovator, our podcast explores the shifts, challenges of modern business evolution. Hello everyone, this is another episode of Digital Shift, aka Corporate Evolution Tales. And today with me, my guest is Lars. Thank you so much, Lars, for being the guest and being today with us. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about this conversation.
Of course, amazing. Okay, would you like to introduce yourself and share with our audience your experience?
Sure. So my name is Lars Helgeson. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Green Rope and a little bit of a spin-off called Complete CRM. And we have been in business for about 15 years doing CRM as our main focus. But from the very beginning, we've had a very holistic approach to how we think CRM should work, where everything should be measuring all the elements of a relationship. So sales, marketing, customer service, account management, all of those things should be combined into one centralized place so that you can have access to the right information, you can secure it, and you can set up automation to help you save a little bit of time.
Amazing. Okay, and from here, I think the logical question is, what do you think about digital transformation?
I think digital transformation means different things to different people. A lot depends on what industry you're in, and a lot depends on where you're coming from. If you talk to a business that was recently started or a software as a service business that lives in the digital world, digital transformation may be something that only applies to, say, some of their new hires and training and finding ways to optimize something that is probably already very heavily dependent on software. When you start talking about larger, older organizations that have been around for a long time and that have it may be a lot of history and a lot of legacy software that's been around for a long time, the concept of digital transformation goes more into the day-to-day operations. And everything from changing the way people sell to changing the way they market to changing the way they support their customers so that as many things as possible can be managed in a digital environment. And with that comes a lot of accountability, a lot of understanding of process, and a lot of really thinking about it, not just from how is one individual person going to operate and run their little part of the business, but how does it work for everybody? How do they all work together as a team? Because ultimately, the reason why we're doing digital transformation is to make teamwork happen a lot more efficiently.
Yes, agree. And when we are speaking about the processes, what do you think are like main parts that teams should be concentrated on when speaking about the digital transformation?
It's going to be different for every business, but what I always tell business leaders is that this is the special sauce that a leader brings into the business, where it's a combination of leadership and creativity, where you're looking at what are you actually selling and who are you selling to. It's a very fundamental approach to why are you here? And if you figure out why you're here from the very 30,000 foot view, and there are things that you can do to help with that, coming up with customer journeys, buyer journeys, where you're looking at everything from how people learn about you to how they become familiar with your product, how do they make the decision to buy from you, and then how do you support them as customers. You look through that entire journey, and the better you understand that, the better you're able to apply what you're doing to and this digital transformation process to all those elements, because it's going to touch every company. And so when you have marketing people that are developing messaging that maybe it's not all online, maybe some of it's offline. If you're doing events or you're going to trade shows, or even if you're doing print, or people still advertise on radio and television, things like that. So it's not all going to be through pay-per-click advertising or SEO. And
Okay.
once you understand how that starts at the beginning, then you're creating a way to track your leads until they become customers. And whether that
Mm-hmm.
involves a salesperson and how they get involved in the process, and then service, where you've got customer service managing that, that has visibility into both how did they arrive through marketing, how were they
Mm-hmm.
sold, what were they sold, and then how do we make sure that the customer is happy and then they become advocates of your brand.
Yeah.
All of that needs to be stored in a digital environment so that the people who
Right.
have access who should have access to that information are able
Mm-hmm.
to pull it up. People who are able to say, if you're a salesperson, you want to know, where did this person come from? You want to know,
Mm-hmm.
what are they interested in? Can you do things like data appending as a way to bring
Mm-hmm.
more information to bear so the salesperson can do their job better? Can you leverage tools like AI to make things more
Yeah.
effective? And then can you do things like sales enablement as a way to
Mm-hmm.
automatically send content to people when they need it, and try to personalize that whole experience? And you really can't do that old school. You can't do that
Yes.
with paper. You're just not going to.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you try, your funnel is going to have to be so small because your salespeople literally can't keep that much information in their head about more than a
Yeah.
few. And so, and that's where I think the concept of digital transformation has to come from
Mm-hmm.
above. You have to have someone who sees the vision of how you want your company to operate, know
Right.
who you're selling and how you're selling to them, and keeping your customers happy all the way through. And that's really
Mm-hmm.
why digital transformation, it's a very holistic thing because everyone's involved, and
Mm-hmm.
it's more than just, let's just buy a bunch of software and plug it in. You've
Mm-hmm.
got people who have to have this vision and execute on that vision in a way that makes everyone in the company feel like they're part of the process.
Yes, agree. I think you brought so many good points, and starting from the end, related to the processes that there are. I think all is about giving right questions, and you mentioned several questions during your answer, right? And the main part of finding the goal is also to give correct answer. To give correct questions, which
Mhm.
will bring you to the goal, and then having people understand all that why you are doing it. And as you mentioned, the old school way of doing stuff, it can be done, but still it's possible to be done, but it's already not as productive as having some parts of the operation automated, which is one of the parts that we have in digital transformation. And I think a lot of people are afraid of the change to go through this digital transformation because of the cost, because of the amount of hours that should be spent on that stuff. So, what do you think is important in that part so the digital transformation is going as smooth as possible for the companies?
I think that, so much of leadership is a human problem combined with a
Mm-hmm.
technology problem, right? We have to, as leaders, especially in 2024, we can't expect business to be done the same way it was even 10 or 20 years ago.
Right.
And human nature being what it is, you will always have people who resist change. You will always have
Mm-hmm.
people who don't want to learn something new simply because that's just in their nature. And
Mm-hmm.
you find that with a potential fear that if someone feels like their power is being taken away and they're no
Yeah.
longer the only people that know how to do something, then they feel like they can be fired. And we run
Mm-hmm.
into this in CRM all the time because salespeople hate the idea that if a company knows everything about the relationship between them and their leads, then
Mm-hmm.
the company can fire them and a new salesperson can just step in, which is important for the company to not be stuck with one salesperson who may not be a good
Right.
fit for any number of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And from a company's perspective, you don't want to feel like you're being held hostage to someone. And
Mm-hmm.
from a person's perspective, you don't want to feel like you're totally expendable. And
Yes.
so how do we make these two very different and opposing feelings come together? And I think digital transformation has a way to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
it really comes down to finding ways for people in the company to feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
to be part of this environment, to be part of the team,
Yeah,
and to feel like the digital transformation gives them the tools to help them work better, to help
exactly.
them
Yep.
be more productive. And that's really what it comes down to, is if you can take away some of the drudgery, the things that people
Mm-hmm.
don't enjoy doing, so that people can focus on the things that they're really good at, which
Mm-hmm.
really humans are best at creating these relationships. They're the best at having, that personal touch and thinking
Mm-hmm.
creatively and solving problems creatively. If you can use digital transformation to automate a lot of those tasks, and then do things like automatically create reports, so that people aren't just going through spreadsheets and
Yeah.
running the same things over and over again. It's what you want to build is an environment where people
Mm-hmm.
are able to solve their problems and do their work and enjoy it, because they feel like they're
Mm-hmm.
part of the team, and they're able to do those things that really make them feel and create a lot
Right.
of value.
Yes, agree. And when we are speaking about people, I think that one of the most important things is the communication that you have with them. And as you mentioned, it's about understanding and but also about explaining transparently the stuff that is done during digital transformation, so people understand why it is done and what is the goal, as we mentioned. But we also have other challenges, right? So, what are your thoughts on what other challenges there are when we are starting digital transformation?
I think the biggest is understanding the scope of what it is that needs to
Mm-hmm.
change. And that's where you really have to come up with your understanding your model. Who are you selling
Yeah.
to? Understanding your buyer's journey, and how
Mm-hmm.
are all of the ways that you're interacting with your customers. And then
Mm-hmm.
understanding your data model, which is understanding how you're storing the information you need to be able to do those things. So those are all strategic, with
Yeah.
involvement from the people in the various different departments that are involved with the marketing, sales, and service
Mm-hmm.
sides of the business. So I think as a leader, being able to, whether you do it on a whiteboard or you do it on a piece of
Mm-hmm.
paper, or you've got a bunch of sticky notes that you're putting up on a wall, or there are applications that you can get online that help
Yeah.
you with mapping, and having a good understanding of your market helps you pull all those pieces together. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things, when you look at things like ISO 27001, and
Mm-hmm.
and before that ISO 9000. So much of that is based on understanding process,
Yes.
and how, if you as a business can follow and document process, then you're a lot more stable. You're
Mm-hmm.
a lot more able to identify where are the things that should be transformed first. You see those weak points first, where you can say, okay, well,
Agree.
maybe we, instead of doing follow-up calls for every time
Yeah.
someone requests a lead, maybe we set up an automated sequence of emails or text
Mm-hmm.
messages, and then we do a call. And
Yeah.
or maybe you send a survey to gather more information, so that the time spent is more efficient when the lead is talking to the salesperson. So
Mm-hmm.
those are kind of low hanging fruit, but it really comes down to, you don't know what you need to solve if you don't take the time to map the way your business operates.
Agree. Agree. And when we are mentioning about the operation of business and generally the processes being mapped, I think one part that is coming to my mind is related to documentation that there are, and it's really important to have the documentation. It's not about like the information that will not give anything, but specifically like about the processes, about the changes that have been made, like the change management and all that stuff. And we
Mhm.
also have lessons learned, right? So we are like documenting stuff that can be then opened by someone. They are reading it and then saying, okay, this is what happened at that moment, so I don't need to do it, or like I need to be careful with that. So What do you think are some lessons learned from your experience on like changing staff and operations?
I think that there are two types of processes that really require a lot of attention. One is sort of the
Mm-hmm.
day-to-day process where you have to understand things like how do your leads find you, and then if they find you through a particular channel, what do you do with them?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if someone sees an ad for your company on Google and they click a link and they go to a landing page and then they fill out a
Mm-hmm.
form, and then what happens? Does someone call them? Do you send them a text message? Do you send them an
Mm-hmm.
email? What do you do? And so those are sort of the day-to-day kinds of things. But I think a big part of process also is looking at what happens when things don't go to plan.
Yeah.
And you can do this for marketing, you can do it for sales, and you can do it for
Mm-hmm.
operations. I know it's big in the IT world, especially because, there's always, you have to be prepared for disaster. Servers could fail, networks could go down.
Right.
You have to be ready for that. So a big part of having is, a disaster recovery plan. Um,
Mm-hmm.
where what happens when our hair's on fire, so that when our hair's on fire, we're not totally panicking and we're able to bring the
Yeah.
system online as quickly as possible. And
Mm-hmm.
so a big part of that too is as you figure out how to do your day-to-day operations and you figure out your emergency operations, you
Mm-hmm.
look at where those weak points are. And it's a very typical kind of IT way of looking at things where you've always got a backup, right? So if
Yeah.
one server fails, your system doesn't go out. If one of your load balancers fails, your whole
Mm-hmm.
network is down. If your firewall fails, your network isn't down. So, you always plan for these redundancies.
Yeah.
And I think if you think about that same idea for marketing and sales, you can do something very similar where what happens if in a campaign a lead shows up and then they're not responsive? What are you going to do to try
Mm-hmm.
and engage them? If a salesperson has a meeting and then they don't follow up, what do you do to try and learn from that experience, or
Mm-hmm.
try to get them to come back in some way? Can you give them an offer that makes them interested enough to want to come back? So
Yes.
again, it all goes back to process. And the better you understand your process, the better you're able to digitally transform it. And if
Mm-hmm.
you get all this written down, whether it's in a diagram form or, and I don't like super long form content. I don't, like business. I remember back in
Yeah.
business school, which was long ago when dinosaurs ruled the earth, there were pages and pages and pages. Like if you wrote a business plan,
Mm-hmm.
have been like 100 pages long, and
Mm-hmm.
I've never believed that was the best way to run a business because things change way too quickly to write a
Right.
100-page document. But I think if you can write things down, and I think especially now, humans are visual creatures, right? We like to see
Right.
pictures. So
Yeah.
if we create flow diagrams, if we use bullet points, we summarize things, and not in flowery language, but in short, bullet
Human
points.
language.
Right, exactly. The way we think. Because,
Mm-hmm.
if you're reading a novel, sure, be verbose, write all the things.
Right.
But if you're doing business and, if something, especially if you're doing these plans, you're writing plans
Mm-hmm.
out for disaster recovery, you don't want to have to read through paragraphs and paragraphs. You want step
Yeah.
by step, do this, do this, do this, do this. And I think it's
Right.
very similar when you're talking with marketing and sales, where, if you're drawing a flow diagram of what happens if,
Mm-hmm.
then you
Mm-hmm.
can look at that and say, okay, yeah, I know if this happens. And then you should be able to translate that into your CRM. You should be able
Mm-hmm.
to take these flow diagrams and create automated workflows that support what you're trying to do. And
Right.
if your CRM doesn't support that, then get a new CRM.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not a trivial task, but what you don't want to do is invest in software and people to design and work with that software and training, and
Yeah.
realize that it doesn't do what you need it to do to support the way you operate your business.
100%. Yes. When you were speaking about keeping everything in human words or like in human language, I think first thing that is coming to my mind is keeping everything simple, which is so important. Even with digital transformation, sometimes people are as you mentioned, like they're adding application or extensions and all that stuff, but it's not about that. It's keeping everything simple, understanding the process, and making sure that you are automating right spots that can be improved and they can be tracked. You can have success metrics and all that stuff. And as you mentioned also about ISO 27001 and the other types, I think it's all about understanding the data and having the practices that can secure stuff. And also related to digital transformation on that part, it's so important to teach people even when it is already done. So we can say, okay, this part is done. We automated stuff. We did the digital transformation on this spot. But it's all about making sure that people learned from it and they understand clearly what has been done there. And the same goes with the ISO and the standards that there are for it. I think it's like all about the communication when you are explaining people, okay, this is the way that you need to treat data. This is the way that you are working so it's more secure and all that stuff. And there are so many other technologies that we can use. A lot of people, when we are saying digital transformation, they're like, yes, AI tools can help. Yes, they can make it faster. So what are your thoughts about AI? Is it supporting digital transformation? Is it disturbing it? How it is for you?
I think it does. I think it helps.
Mm-hmm.
But with AI, you have to be really careful. Um,
Yes,
AI will spit out nonsense.
agree.
It is very quick to just come up with stuff that makes no sense. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good if you can leverage it. You know, into our CRM, we have it built where it will, if I'm trying to sell you a widget and I have information about you and I can put in a simple command, I can say, write me an idea of how I would sell in X number of words this
Yeah.
thing to Mariam. And
Mm-hmm.
knowing who you are, how old you are, what your interests are, wherever, it
Mm-hmm.
will customize and personalize that message for you. But
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to just sit back and let AI write it because who knows what it'll say,
Exactly.
right? So,
Yes.
but it can give you a lot of good ideas. You know, it's the same thing. We've
Mm-hmm.
got an AI newsletter builder and an AI blog generator where
Mm-hmm.
say, write me a newsletter about X, and it'll just, you know, it'll pick the template for you
Yeah.
automatically, and it will generate the images and the text, and bam, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can write a newsletter in 20 seconds. It's tempting to say, all right, we're good, we're done.
Yeah.
Uh, but guaranteed there will be stuff in that newsletter that you'll look at and think, I don't know if I want to put that in there. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
so I think as a tool for content generation, AI will save time. And then I
Mm-hmm.
think as a way, like one of the things that we have is like a summary. So if I
Mm-hmm.
were going to look at a contact or a lead, I can say AI, and it'll talk to you if you want.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like, tell me about who this person is, and it will say like, you've had X number of meetings. This is what they're interested in. Whatever, you know. So it kind of
Mm-hmm.
creates this auditory
Yeah.
summary where it tells you about this person, which is great and helpful. So I think you can do things like that to save time, but you want to be you don't want to blindly trust it, and
Yeah.
and I think it helps to just recognize it for what it is. It's going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
AI hallucinates, so you have to be very careful about what it is that what you're using it for. I think you had mentioned something a little bit ago that I thought was an important thing to touch on, which is the importance
Mm-hmm.
of that reporting side,
Yeah.
and the metrics, because that's another important element of
Agree.
this
Yeah.
digital transformation is knowing what works and what doesn't work. It's that
Mm-hmm.
sort of that feedback loop. You know, you think about it from marketing, it's like you have all these different campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when you think about it, and some might draw in better leads or worse leads. Some may be you may get more or less, fewer from a different channel.
Yeah.
And so those flow, of course, into the sales process, and then you have to evaluate the salespeople, the throughput, how many people are they talking to, what are their close rates? Do you have feedback loops where you're getting feedback from
Mm-hmm.
leads or customers saying I had a good experience or I didn't have a good experience? And then that goes to customer service, which is the same thing, where you always want to be
Yeah.
gathering information about, you know, everything from, you know, if you have chats, how many chats are you hitting versus missing? What sort of
Mm-hmm.
sentiment are you getting in the chat responses and the conversations? So, I mean, there's a lot of metrics to pull in, and I think it's important. It's just as important to gather those as to determine which are the important ones,
Yeah.
what really matters, and how does
Mm-hmm.
that flow into better understanding whether your digital transformation is going well or if it's just
Yeah.
making up things. And so
Yes.
I think it's just a lot of it is this balance between trying to over digitalize everything
Mm-hmm.
and then making sure that you do it and not just for the sake of doing it. You don't want to
Yeah.
create 50 report emails if you're not going to read any of them, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's how do you distill the feedback that you get and the information and the reporting that you get into something that's actually actionable and
Mm-hmm.
helpful.
Agree. A lot of people, when they are saying digital transformation, they are thinking it's one action, like one thing that you are doing it, that's all. But based on my experience, and I think a lot of people that have actually experience in digital transformation, they will agree that it's not about one action that you are doing and it's done. And as you mentioned, you need to follow up with stuff. You need to make sure that it's really working, because nobody said that digital transformation is something that will improve everything in one step or one click. It's something that like you need to check if it is really working. Was it the spot that you were like there was a need to improve it and all that? And for that you need to have those metrics, as you mentioned, the success metrics, which are like reporting you the data which is helping you to make that continuous improvement. So you have that part done and you are sure that your process is exactly what you expected it to be. And it's coming from the beginning when you are setting goals, as you mentioned, and you are giving the questions. You are then checking if the goal was done, if it is really what we tend to have. And then we are also making sure that it's working still like 2-3 months after the digital transformation was done.
Right.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Okay, we and what I think this will be my last question about the advice based on your experience and what you saw in this world of digital transformation. What advice would you offer to the companies or like the individuals there that want to start the digital transformation?
I think it goes back to having a fundamental understanding of how your business works, which means taking
Mm-hmm.
that step back and thinking about the 30,000 foot view, having the discussion with your leaders, and
Mm-hmm.
if you have a small company, everybody's there, but get in front of a whiteboard or ideally some sort of a working surface where you can
Yeah.
maybe use sticky notes or whatever, but where you all agree on what's important to the business, so you
Mm-hmm.
understand who are you selling to, how are you selling, and what data do you need to be able to do that effectively. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think if you and this is one of those things where people always talk about working on the business versus working in the business. You
Yes.
really have to take that time to work on the business, to step back and
Mm-hmm.
just write down what that process looks like. I mean, I think we all know when there's something in our business that needs digital transformation. We all understand where there are inefficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we, as the leaders of the business, we may not see that. Collectively, the business can probably, if you brought everyone
Yeah.
together, you asked someone who was down, at the very lowest level, who was maybe,
Mm-hmm.
writing code or dealing directly with customers or building things, that they would be able to point out issues with some process that they could improve. But those
Mm-hmm.
fixes by themselves won't do a lot if it's not put in the greater context of the whole business. So
Yes.
you have to understand how the whole business works, so that when someone down below says, I see an inefficiency, then
Mm-hmm.
you can improve process, maybe not the way they thought because they're looking at the problem from their perspective. But if you have
Mm-hmm.
overall perspective where you can see that maybe we can address this problem upstream by doing this differently that maybe they didn't know about.
Yeah.
And that's really
Yeah.
the value that leadership brings to this. This is what makes business leaders so important, and why
Mm-hmm.
the leadership, it's a very human solution to this problem of digital transformation, because you're talking about technology, but
Yeah.
really how it's done, and the creative side of putting all the pieces together, really it comes from a human. That's
Mm-hmm.
how that has to be done. you don't just say, let's buy a bunch of software and call ourselves transformed.
Yes, agree. So it's all about having the general picture and having right people that can lead to have that picture done, and then going like zoom in and improving the parts that there are. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, Lars, for being here today with us. Any last words that you want to share with our audience?
No, I really appreciate you having me on here, and I think the last word that I would say, and I'm in the CRM space, right? Green Rope has been around for a long time, but I would say before you go buying or choosing a new CRM, because that's such an important part of your digital transformation, make sure that you write down your requirements first before you go looking for your CRM, and go and get a demo from a number of CRM vendors, and make sure that in the demo you can say, this is my business, this is what I need to have happen. And then they'll be able to, assuming the salespeople are at least somewhat honest, they should be able to tell you, yes, we can do that. And then get a demo and have them demonstrate it. And I think that's an important part of the process. Rather than saying that I know this is a great CRM, or I know my friend uses this one and they're happy with it. One size does not fit all when it comes to those. And I think it's important to understand that you got to start with requirements first.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being the guest, and hope you enjoyed the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.